Thomas here with Much Props. Going to give you another how-to video. Today we are building something from the new Disney series Moon Knight, which recently released, I believe, at the end of March, and I'm currently building it at the beginning of April. I have not watched the series yet, and I've only seen like a trailer and a picture. And that's what I'm basing this build off of. So yeah, not too much reference images to go off of for myself, but the premise for the superhero is pretty interesting. It is a guy with dissociative identity disorder, which used to be called multiple personality disorders. And it's pretty interesting story plot, I think. It involves ancient Egypt and all kinds of pretty epic storyline. So there are multiple characters that this particular superhero will, embody. And the one that kind of stuck out to me were the two that obviously he wore, covers, masks, helmets, whatever. I really liked the Mr. Moon Knight helmet that he wears, and I think I'm going to try that based off a front view of a picture that I have. So today we are building a Mr. Moon Knight helmet from the TV series Moon Knight. Let's get to building! I spent a couple hours building this template up from scratch using the duct tape and foil method that you've seen me use before. You can get the free template down in the description below the video. It is the last link and is in PDF format. Cut it out and you're caught up with me. I trace it onto some 6mm EVA foam. Since this mask will be white in the end, I decided to just use a pencil instead of a Sharpie for tracing because Sharpie will bleed through the paint and leave red blotches all over the end product when using light colors. The cover page of my template explains all the markings on the patterns, but apparently a lot of people don't read that, so I'm gonna explain it. The U-shaped lines on the edges are registration marks to help line up corresponding parts. The green highlight means a 45-degree angle cut outward from the line, and a blue means inward from the line. Foam size is marked on each individual piece, and if you see an asterisk followed by a R, that means it's the right side. Flip the pattern over and trace again to get the mirrored part for the left. With my pattern arranged in the general orientation with the other parts, I add contact cement to all of my edges, and after it has had time to set up, I'm ready to assemble. I like to glue up one half at a time so the parts don't sit for too long and lose their tackiness. Typically, I close up the darts on the pieces first, then follow the registration marks on my edges and begin tacking parts together. I do my best to keep the outside meeting points flush with each other, but if an area sits proud of another, I can quickly sand it with a rotary tool to fix that mistake. Now that both sides are assembled, I apply contact cement down the middle, give a few minutes for it to set up, and then glue it when it is no longer wet by pushing the halves together. Though it looks relatively simple in the video, keep in mind I have hundreds of builds on the channel. Maybe I can give you a pointer or two here. First, work slowly, don't rush yourself. Softly tack down parts to begin with because you can kind of pull them apart if you don't push too hard. I typically work on the front edge, then go to the back edge. That way it's not like flopping back and forth as I work my way back. Once both those pieces are in place, I then work my way to the middle. Areas that refuse to close up, I bust out the super glue and shut them into submission. The middle seam will get mostly covered with a stitch detail, so I'm not too worried about it being perfect. The moon assembly on the forehead is a nice beveled crescent. After I cut it out and put my center line on there, I go in with a rotary tool and chunk out a majority with the sandpaper bit first. Then I smooth it over with a stone bit to knock off all the rough texture. After the moon is carved, I trace it into position on the forehead, glue up both sides, and permanently join the two parts together. The mask has a very thick stitch that goes over from one side and around the crescent to follow the middle of the seam line to the back, or at least that's what I am assuming from the front view picture that I have as a reference. There's a lot of approaches you could take for this, actually stitching in the detail, cutting thin 2mm strips and gluing it in, using split cable tubing, etc, etc. I decided wood burning in stitches unevenly onto some 10mm half dowels would be best for me. Make sure to wear a respirator and work in a well ventilated area while burning EVA foam. You don't want to breathe in the nasty fumes. I thinly spread on contact cement to both parts and tack it all together. Notice I have a little guideline there to follow when I'm putting it down. When I'm happy with the positioning of it, I firmly push the two parts together for a permanent connection. It's starting to really take shape, and that small piece will help to keep it from separating in the back. From the reference image I have, I can clearly see that the mask is covered with like this really nice textured fabric. You could definitely take that approach and use some spray adhesive to attach it instead of doing a paint job with, but I don't have that fabric, and I think it could be achieved by doing a little bit of Mod Podge. So I slather on Mod Podge and stipple it with the chip brush to give it texture. This application will also help hide seam lines and cover up rough sanding areas or holes that may still be there. After a couple of hours, it's dry and ready for the next step. though probably not necessary, I'm going to go ahead and do the typical 2 coats of Plasti Dip. Before you type it, why gray Plasti Dip? Because I'm convinced white is purposefully a different formula guaranteed to give you bubbles and problems. While yes, I have some, it will continue to gather cobwebs in the back of my storage area or when I need to purposefully mess up a paint job. I always have problems with white Plasti Dip. I don't know what it is. Plus, gray gives me the ability to dry brush on white and pick up some of that texture from my Mod Podge. I apply a thin 2 layers of dry brush and then stipple on a texture over the top of it with my brush. Stippling this application just means dabbing it on with a little bit of paint, like taking little miniature stabs with my acrylic, purposefully not covering fully over the mask to give that fabric-like look instead. It is very faint but noticeable up close. And we are finished. I think it turned out pretty awesome. This may be the best fitting helmet that I have ever built. It snugly fits in all the right places. I definitely see this becoming another template for reuse. I've already done one that will come out in a week or two, and I really like it. It is definitely one that you can build off of. A lot of superheroes kind of fit this form factor as far as shape. So maybe you'll try and build one of these yourselves and impress your friends with your ability to pull something from a TV series that you know absolutely nothing about and always need a picture of and be able to hopefully replicate something that's relatively accurate to what's on the screen. Oddly. Maybe you'll get some...
Yay!
And inevitably, they're going to ask you, how'd you make that? You can give them one of these. Tell them, much props. It is snug. So let me let down the man bun. Fix my ears. And, peace out. If you enjoyed this build and want to continue to see epic masks like this one, please join these people listed here with me over on Patreon to build a bigger, better, more creative community together.